We're going to have a lot to get into. I'm excited about your new book. And I want to start off going all the way back to the beginning of your money journey. And this had quite a rocky start. The year you were born, your parents actually went into bankruptcy. And obviously at that point, you don't have a memory of that first year, the first couple years. But I'm just curious, what is your first money memory?
Gosh, my first money memory, I remember being little and I remember asking mom and dad for money at the grocery store or something to probably buy gum or candy or like whatever was in the aisle. And I remember them saying, okay, if you want to buy something, you're going to have to earn money. And I was like, what? So from that point on, I learned that I was never given an allowance. I was always on commission. So you work, you get paid. You don't work, you don't get paid. And from then on, yeah, I mean, I was probably 5 years old at the time.
And what kind of things would you do for money?
Oh gosh, chores around the house. And it's funny, we were never paid on kitchen stuff. So we were always required to like bring our dishes to the sink, required to like wash dishes and do stuff for mom as we got older. Like that kind of thing was never paid on because there's certain things like with your kids that you want them to do just because they're part of the family. And then there's some things you can do that you can actually pay them on. So it was feeding the dog, cleaning the room, helping clean out the car, washing the car, that kind of thing.
So you started earning money at an early age. And what would you do with it? What kind of principles did your parents instill in you about saving and spending, and how did that look?
Yeah, there were three main things we did. We had three different envelopes, one marked give, one marked save, and one marked spend. And that's something that I teach parents all the time to do because you want to build all three of those money muscles for your kids. You want to teach them to give first, save second, and spend third. And all of them have great principles. I mean, learning to live with an open hand and generosity being a priority in your life is huge to instill in your kids early on. Saving for something, learning delayed gratification is something even 40-year-olds can learn besides just 4-year-olds, but delaying that and having a goal, saving up, even something really small. My daughter, she's 5, and we just did this with her, and she like bought a Polly Pocket. It was $8 on Amazon, but it took her a few days to do some chores and earn that money. And then lastly, you do want to teach them to spend and to be able to say, you know what, here's some money to have fun with. And there's a lot of great lessons because sometimes you don't spend very wisely, but you're learning all of these principles under your parents' roof where you make really small, inexpensive mistakes versus the first time you're ever handling money. You're out in the real world at 24 making a $30,000 mistake on a car lot. So those early years are really key.
Let's come back to the bankruptcy and talk about the big lesson your dad actually learned from that, which is removing fear of man. So talk about what that is and how that changed things for him going forward.
Yeah, in the book, I talk about how so much of our money decisions and our purchases, specifically with spending money, is for other people. Like we do it because we just assume we need the standard of living in our lives, and other people have things that we want. We want to impress people around us. And a lot of that comparison really drives our spending and ends up driving debt for a lot of families. And dad would say, he was like, oh yeah, I had that. Like I bought a new car and I did it because I wanted to like look successful and feel successful and all of that. And then when you lose everything and you're bankrupt and getting foreclosed on and the car is getting towed, like, yeah, you don't care anymore what people think. Like you're just trying to keep the lights on. And so that removal of caring and making your money decisions based on other people really goes away. And you really end up saying, you know what, it doesn't matter at the end of the day what people have or what they're thinking. I have to do what's best for my family.
And before we move forward, just to caveat on that, your dad is Dave Ramsey, the personal finance expert. Talk about coming out of that bankruptcy. What did that look like for him?
Yeah, I mean, it was years and years of climbing out of that hole. I mean, he tried so hard, him and mom both, not to get to that place, but they did. I mean, he had so much debt, specifically in real estate. And when the banks called all of his notes, it was done. And so out of that, really learning and understanding, okay, how does money work? Because he would say, I have degrees and licenses after my name that I'm supposed to know how to handle money. And here I am broke, bankrupt, like something didn't work. And so going back to say, okay, what are just these common sense, biblically based principles that are so easy to understand, but yeah, it's not common sense anymore. And learning that and starting to teach people is kind of how he came out of that and just realizing, wow, I was doing everything backwards is what he would say. So learning to live without debt, learning to live intentionally on a budget, saving up for an emergency fund, doing all these things we all know to do, but we realize the behavior side of it is really difficult.
And before getting into helping other people and teaching them about money, what did he do?
He went back to real estate actually and he had his license. So he was buying and selling homes
Okay.
to make money.
And then when did he start to teach? How did that all unravel?
Yeah, that started, there was it was actually funny. There's a radio station in Nashville that was in bankruptcy. And so he said, "Hey, could I come on for free and just give you some program? You don't have to pay me. I'll do it for free, but just to have something on the air." And they're like, "Sure." Because they were losing all their shows. So he started the radio show there. He started counseling some friends. Some different people would kind of come around in the community and say, "Hey, you went through this. We're struggling. What did you do to get out?" And then slowly but surely, he wrote the first book, Financial Peace, self-published it, and sold it out of the trunk of his car for years. And it kind of just grew from there.
And as a kid, you would travel around with him on weekends across America and set up shop and sell books at these different talks he was doing. Talk about what that was like.
Yeah, yeah. We would, as a family, with our terrible khaki pants that we had to wear, tucked in, like these collared shirts, that we would have these events. They ended up being massive, 10,000 people in these arenas on Saturdays. But as kids, we were drugged to all these like events, and we had to stand at the back book tables and help sell books. And we worked almost every Saturday doing that. But slowly but surely, at one of those events was the first time that someone on the team suggested that I get up on stage and talk about all the kids' products that we have. And I mean, I thought they were crazy. There was like 6,000 people. I was like, no, there's no way I can do that. But after some convincing and a few weeks of practice, I did. At 15, got up on stage at one of the events and kind of did my little 5-minute pitch of the kids' products. And that's when I learned that I loved to public speaking, which is rare. Most people hate public speaking. But early on, I kind of found that as a gift and something that I enjoyed and something that I use today in my job, or did before the pandemic. But
And you shared a pretty vulnerable story in the book when you came off stage after that first talk. The first piece of feedback you got was negative. So share that story.
yeah, I was 15. It was Spokane, Washington. There was probably 7,000 people in the crowd, and I was just petrified to go out and did it. But I did it and got some laughs and just had so much fun. I remember coming off stage, like probably just shaking from adrenaline. I was like, oh my gosh. And yes, one of the guys on our team was standing there and he was like, okay, he goes, listen, you just talked really fast. You talked really fast. And I was like, oh, and I got so self-conscious in that moment at 15, I'm like, oh no, okay, okay. And then not only, 10 seconds later, other people were around. They were like, great job, Rachel, cheering me on, all that. But yeah, that one moment, I thought I screwed it up. I'm terrible. This is not good. This is not good. And then learning, yeah, I mean, it's someone's opinion. And the truth is I probably was talking too fast and I still talk too fast, 20 years later. But it's just something that you have to realize, okay, the fear of not doing well, which I think people have even with their money, is something that you can't hold you back.
And for you, when did the passion for finances really start? Was it as a kid? Was it after this talk? What age are we talking?
Yeah, for me, it was more college. I went to the University of Tennessee and I was actually in a freshman orientation class and met this girl and we went out to lunch. And I remember she told me that she had a car payment and, she was 18 and had this brand new car. And we kind of started talking about money. And I just felt something inside of me thinking, I'm 18 years old. I don't have all the answers to all these questions, but I know there's a different way. And I know this girl who's sitting across from me at lunch at 18 already believes that debt has to be a part of her life, that debt is just a part of what you do. And everything in me was like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And then, as the years went on, obviously talking to people that had student loan debt and credit card debt and all of this. And so when I graduated college is when I said, okay, I want to travel. And at the time I said, I want to talk to the next generation. I want to talk to high school students and talk to college students about avoiding all the mistakes that they could be making in the future. I kind of looked at my dad as the emergency surgeon and I was the preventative medicine. Like if you can get this early, you can avoid the mistakes and be well on your way to never having money be a stress point. You can build wealth, give generously, do all this so early if you can avoid some of the big pitfalls that a lot of people have.
And going through your teens before you had that moment with your friend, did you ever have a point where you're rebelling against, this is the family business, what the family does? Did you have that time in your life when you were rebelling against that and said, I'm out of this whole money thing?
Yeah, not really. And I kind of credit my parents for that because they didn't make it this big, massive thing in our lives. Like people think that as Dave Ramsey's kid, we had mutual fund birthday parties and budget camps in the summer and that we were obsessed with money. And that was not the case. Mom and dad, and we talked about money, but it was not the center point of life. And I think if it was, I think if it was the only thing and it was held on this pedestal, I feel like I would definitely be the one to rebel. But it wasn't. It was just a part of like, yeah, it's just a part of our life, but it's not our whole life, if that makes sense. But I was the one that was terrible with money. I mean, I bounced 3 checks when I was 15 at the mall, at like Hollister and Abercrombie or wherever I shopped at 15 years old. So I was not great at handling money, but I'm thankful again that like it's lessons you learn and it wasn't a huge deal. It wasn't life or death to my parents.
And are your two siblings into finances and working in the same realm?
No, my sister's not. My brother is though. Yeah, my brother came on the team about 4 years ago.
So let's talk more about childhood. Again, we started off talking about this experience with bankruptcy in the family as a child. Talk about how these early childhood experiences can form how we handle money later on in life, and specifically how that experience, I know you're really young at the time, but coming out of that, how did that impact you later on and maybe even still today?
Yeah, I think how you grew up is huge. I call it your money classroom because your classroom is your household growing up. You learned lessons about every area of life. Some lessons you wish you could probably unlearn, some lessons you take with you into adulthood. And so you have to realize how much this shapes you from whether your parents talked about money or didn't, whether it was a stressful subject in the home or a really calm, peaceful one. It shapes who you are. So you either subconsciously do exactly what your parents did out of just that's what you know, you're mirroring it, where I talk to a lot of people and they do the exact opposite. They say, my parents were like this and I'm doing this. You know, my parents were really cheap and never spent money. And now I just want to enjoy life because they never enjoyed life. Or I remember talking to one person in an interview for this book, and she said, yeah, my parents were so obsessed with everything looking perfect on the outside, but our home life was a mess. But like we had the best cars and the best clothes, and they always make sure that that was all looking good. And so now she's just like, I'll drive a Honda Civic for the rest of my life. Like I want healthy relationships. I don't care about the stuff, you know, like, so it's different how people really take it in, but your viewpoint of money, it is very much shaped by how you grew up. So to understand that going back to your childhood is really important to say, okay, here's how I grew up with money. And here are the things that I'm seeing in my life that I'm either fearful of, I'm avoiding, or I'm actually copying what my parents did.
And specifically, what would that look like to really get in there and start that work?
Yeah, I mean, in the book, I outline these four money classrooms, and so money's communicated in two ways. It's communicated verbally, so it's either open communication, closed communication, and it's communicated emotionally. It's either stressed or calm. So it ends up making these four quadrants. So that first quadrant is the anxious money classroom, and this is where you grew up if it was verbally closed and emotionally stressed. So you grew up, you didn't really know what was going on, but man, you felt the tension around money. Number two is the unstable money classroom. And this is where it's verbally open, but emotionally stressed. So lots of conflict, lots of fighting. You may have heard your parents had the same fight over and over again. They could have fought with extended family about money, but like you heard it. The third money classroom is the unaware money classroom. So this is emotionally calm, but verbally closed. So your head was probably in the sands with money. You didn't really think about it much because it wasn't a thing. It wasn't talked about. It was just like, oh yeah, that's just what it is. Okay. And then the fourth money classroom is definitely the healthiest. And this is the secure money classroom. So this is where it's verbally open and emotionally calm. And in this classroom, you don't have to have a ton of money to be in there. You could have $10 or 10 million, but there's a plan around it. There's agreements. If you're married with your spouse, like, okay, this is what we're doing. And it's talked about. It's not a taboo subject. It's something that you're willing to engage in with your kids. So that fourth money classroom is the healthiest. My prayer is that everyone moves to that classroom in their present, but looking back at your childhood to say, okay, this is how I grew up, one of those four money classrooms, because they all have weaknesses.
And when it comes to speaking about money with your kids, I know your kids are still pretty young, but what age do you recommend having those open conversations about, what your parents are making and how all the money works?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for parents, I always say share, don't scare. So if you are in a stressful situation, which a lot of Americans are, don't be like, oh yeah, 4-year-old, our house is being foreclosed on. We don't know what to do, right? Like you're not going to obviously scare your kids, but understanding how money works. And you don't even have to get specific with your own situation. You don't even have to disclose how much you make. My parents never did that. They never told us. But to say, hey, here are the attributes of money. Here's what you do. You work. That's how you earn money. You give, save, and spend it. Here's what investing looks like. Here's what taxes are. Like you just talk about the subject on a tactical level, but also the emotional level that money is not, it's not your God. It's not ever going to, no amount of money is really going to fulfill you. I mean, it's amazing. The finish line always moves. If you think $1 million is rich, you get 1 million, you think, okay, well, 5 million is rich. And you get 5 million, 10 million is rich. Like it keeps moving to say, okay, it's not going to be your God. It can't fulfill you. You can have fun with it, but it can't be your number one. You want to find contentment and gratitude and generosity. So there's the heart of money as well that needs to be communicated. But yeah, age appropriate. I would say you could start lessons. I mean, as early as 4 or 5 years old for sure on chores, and them picking up the idea that money comes from work. It doesn't just come from Amazon and it shows up at your door like my kids. I swear my kids do. They're like, Amazon, you just whatever you want, it just shows up. And I'm like, yeah, there's money attached to all of this. So, having that discussion with them early on and letting them have some responsibility, because it's amazing. When your kids earn their own money, they give it differently, they save it differently, they spend it differently. And letting them have that experience, I think, is so helpful.
And when it comes to the three envelopes, the giving, the saving, and the spending, I could see how the saving, and the spending could be pretty straightforward for kids and pretty easy to wrap their head around. But what about with your kids, the giving aspect? Talk about that. And has that been something that's been challenging for them to understand and want to partake in?
Yeah, we haven't really divided up the three yet. Our oldest just turned 5. So what we're doing is just working on the, hey, here's what you earn, here's this. And in giving for us, Winston and I, we have our percentage that we give locally to our church. We have percentages that we give other places. And what's hard too, I'm finding that's different from my childhood, is I would watch my parents give. I could see them actually give physical money, but now so much is online and automated. And so Winston and I have had this discussion, like, what does that look like? What does it look like to show them how we're going to give? And I think part of it is just bringing in the conversation. And so we do talk about giving, but sadly they don't see it happen. And so I think as a parent in 2020, 2021, it's a challenge to say, okay, how do we as a family create this level of giving and generosity? And I think part of it too is the spirit that you live out of the selflessness. So much of our world is so me focused, and other parts of our lives, how we show them, because more is caught than taught. So how can they catch us in moments as their parents of selfless and serving?
And part of what you talk about in the book is that when we give, we want to actually start doing that before we're at a debt, if we're in a position where we have debt that we're paying down. So how does somebody go about wrapping their head around that? If they see, the bills coming in each month, money's tight, and it's like they might start to realize the importance of that. But how come they would start giving before they were in a position of financial, strength?
Yes, I have found with giving, it's not always about math. It's a lot of the heart issue. And if you make it a priority, it can be a priority. And I say give a little until you can give a lot. Just be giving something. When you can practice giving, even if you're in a very stressful money situation, things happen in your life. Giving is the one part of money that unleashes so much in your life that you have no idea. Like the joy that comes with giving when there is someone in need and you are able to give to them, no vacation, no car, nothing like that satisfies your heart the way it does. So that's like part of the gift. And like, I just want everyone to experience that. But what it does too, it changes who you are. It changes your character, and not just in your finances, but it changes you as a spouse, you as a parent. I mean, all of this starts to build and really shape your heart in a different way. And it's such a crucial part. So I say give no matter where you are, even if it's a little, because money's also a magnifying glass. It makes you more of what you already are. And my goal for people is to be out of debt, to have a fully funded emergency fund, to be investing in retirement, paying off their house, and ultimately building wealth over the long term and being generous. And so some people think, well, if I just had more money, I would be generous. But the thing is what's being magnified in who you are today, because that's what's going to be magnified when you have a ton of money. So if you're not giving today and you get $1 million one day and you haven't been practicing giving, it doesn't make it easier. In fact, sometimes it makes it harder.
In your book, you share that you and your family were building a house. And you talk about how during the process of writing the book, you're a few months out from moving into the new house. Are you guys in there now? And
We are.
how has
We're
that
in.
unfolded?
Yes. Yep. Yep. It's so fun. Yeah, we
Talk
are
about
in.
that experience with your husband, being creative together and working through the process of, creating your own place for the family.
Yes. Yeah. This was a big goal we had, was to build, and we knew we kind of had a timeline of when we wanted to. And building a house, it was something that I not nervous about, but you hear horror stories of people doing this, that they like end up wanting to be divorced, or it goes twice over the budget. It takes 3 years, some crazy number of time because it's not managed properly. So walking in, we're like, okay, this is a goal we want. We want to do this. And my husband's in real estate, so he loves it. And I'll be honest, it was one of the most fun things that we did. And it was so fun, not just the process of the build, but I say it in the book, and it's true, to have a goal together as a family that you accomplish, that sense of like, we are a team and we can do anything is what it feels like. The unity that is brought together as a married couple when you have a financial goal is unlike anything else. And so that was such a fun part, almost as fun as the house itself. Like when we did it, we were like, I cannot believe we did it because we sacrificed a lot. We said no a lot to do it. I mean, and the fact that we did it, it was just crazy. It was one of those moments like, wow, we did this.
And you did it without going into debt.
Yeah, we did it without going into debt. Which is not, you're like, you're holding your tongue like, what? I know. So I always talk about living without debt is one of my big messages, but a mortgage is the one type of debt I'm okay with. So I always say have at least 10 to 20% for a down payment. Make sure your monthly payment is no more than 25% of your take home pay on a 15-year fixed rate. So that's my formula for a mortgage. So 100% down, I mean, that would be amazing. I think when you don't have a mortgage, you're able to do a whole lot with your money, which is really fun. So that's a stretch goal. But I know that's not reality for everyone. And it was something that we saved up for a long period of time.
Let's talk about your daily gratitude practice. I really found this part of the book fascinating where you do this daily gratitude practice and it eventually leads to contentment. Talk about what that looks like.
Yeah, gratitude is a part that is so, so huge, I think, in everyone's life. There's so many studies that are shown that when you focus on gratitude, you have a more fulfilling life. There's something in you that is more joyful, more happy. And so gratitude for me, I learned early on, if I can just, think through, write down, I do it on my notes app on my phone, two things that I'm grateful for. And so just having something front of mind is so huge because what happens is gratitude ends up moving into humility. And I love Rick Warren's quote on humility. He said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And so when you are giving and you're grateful and all of that's kind of overflowing in who you are, humility is really what that next step. And then past humility comes contentment. And contentment is a place that is so key for anyone to have because people who are content, I believe they win with money faster. People who are content are more generous. They're able to sacrifice their lifestyle to get out of debt. Content people, they just live this overall more peaceful, joyous life. And that contentment piece is huge. So gratitude is really that big first step into it.
Let's talk about credit cards. I know on the Dave Ramsey plan, he's not a fan of credit cards. For you, is this something that's, are you considering bending on that at all? Or what does that look like?
No, I'm not bending on it. I think God would strike me with lightning if I bent on any of this. Yeah, no, credit cards. Yeah, all forms of debt, obviously, except for the mortgage piece that we just talked about. I stay away from, and that's what I teach people to do as well. Stay away from it because at the end of the day, what ends up building wealth, it's your motivation and the principles that you put into place. And when you don't even play with the idea of, hey, I'm going to borrow money for this, and you actually use your own money, not only do you spend less, that's what studies show. When you spend your own money, you actually spend less. But also, you're not just fooling around. People do it for the points and they do it for the airline miles and all this. But the amount of money you have to spend in order to get all these things, what you're actually overspending, you would actually save on the front end if you just bought the airline ticket and didn't spend all that. So it's all been proven mathematically. And I also think that there's just a level of emotion, again, to this money piece. When you don't owe anyone anything, there's a level of freedom there that is unlike anything else. So do people pay their credit cards off every month? Sure, they do. There are people that do that, absolutely. But also the average family in America owes $16,000 on their credit cards. And I'm like, you know what? It's a slippery slope to me. So we're the extreme stance. And we're like, nope, use a debit card will do everything a credit card will do except get you into debt.
And it seems like talking about the points, like you mentioned, focusing on those, it just takes you away from doing other work and focusing on your passion and what really matters.
Yeah, I think so. And I've been blessed to talk to a lot of successful people in life. And no one has said, oh, yeah, I became a multimillionaire because of my Discover points. Like that's not what makes you wealthy. And so when you play the game, it's wild. And then I was thinking about this recently. I'm like, in order to get those points and to actually credit those airline miles, the banks are able to do that because they're making interest on people that can't pay their bills. So you're getting all this quote unquote points free stuff because other people aren't able to do it. And it's the sick game that I'm like, I just don't want a part of it.
Are there any major principles that you and your dad don't see eye to eye on?
Honestly, not the basic money principles. No, I mean, I'm pretty in line with it because it works. That's the hard thing too, is I'm like, if I dispute it, we have 20 years of proven history of evidence that has gotten people to places that they never thought they could be financially because they chose to walk this path. But we're different people. I mean, we laugh all the time because he's like, yeah, no is a complete answer. He says it all the time. And I'm like, It is, but I also will talk about the why, which is part of why I wrote this book. I'm like, I mean, I will dig in more to it and have more of the conversation. He's a little bit more black and white. He's kind of the big rusty uncle everyone wants, and I'm the friend that will walk beside you and talk to you about it.
So let's get into some of the tactical stuff here. And the first step for people that maybe are looking to get their finances in a little bit better order, and that's the first baby step, which is saving $1,000. So talk about why this is the first step and why that's so important.
Yes, well, the baby steps, it's 7 steps that you walk through. And that first one is that $1,000. So this is your starter emergency fund. And before the pandemic hit, 40% of Americans could not cover a $400 emergency. And that's a problem. And so to say, you know what, I'm going to take this step, that $1,000 step, I always say is the easiest step, but it's also the hardest step. And it's the easiest step because it's $1,000. Even if that sounds like a ton, you can cut out restaurants, you can not go shopping. I mean, you could work a little extra, you could do something and you can save $1,000. Like that's doable. I want you to do that as fast as possible. But it's also the hardest step because you're saying, okay, I'm going to embark on this journey, on this plan with my money that is so different than anything I've ever done. And it's scary, it's intimidating because no one likes change. Even if you're in a situation right now and you're like, okay, I don't like where I am financially. In order to do something different, there's still a level of vulnerability and a level of fear that you're like, oh man, I don't want to, I'm going to change everything the way I look at money. It's scary. So that first step is hard. It really is. But getting that starter emergency fund gets you on your way.
So is this cash in hand in the home?
Or a savings account, a money market account, just not in the market, something that you can get to quickly. Because, if your tire goes flat or you actually need money, yeah, that's where you go to.
So the next step is using the debt snowball to pay off our debt. So talk about what that snowball looks like and how that works.
Yeah, the debt snowball is where you list out all of your debt except for your mortgage, smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rates, pay minimum payments on everything and pay off that smallest debt first. And in this process, we always say that it's like scorched earth. Like you do a budget and you cut everything out that you can. I mean, it is like necessities. And that's all you pay for. I mean, you don't go out to eat, you don't shop, you don't go on vacation, you do nothing but focus on getting off that first debt. And that first debt, even if it's a $500 credit card bill, you pay it off and there's this level of hope that ends up igniting in you because you're like, oh, okay, well, that's gone forever. Like, I don't have that. So you take all the minimum payments you're paying on that and you roll it over to the second smallest debt. And again, throwing as much income as possible. And then once that's paid off, you have the minimum payment of the first debt and now the second debt, and it rolls over to the third smallest debt. And you keep going. And so we found that that is the most effective way to pay off debt versus highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, because their personal finance, it's 80% behavior. It's only 20% head knowledge. And so that behavior change has to occur. And in order for that to occur, you have to see progress. And there is something about the human spirit that when you do it, it's like being on a diet and you lose weight the first week. You're like, oh, it's working, and you keep it going. I mean, it's amazing. And so we find that most people are paying off all of their debt on average from 18 to 24 months. So it's a process, right? I mean, it's a year and a half to 2 years of your life you're doing this. But once you have no debt, you don't owe anyone anything. At that point in your life, you're able to do so much with your income. So it's a short period of time to sacrifice for long-term gain.
You mentioned budget in there. How does somebody go about starting one? I know this is something that people obviously have heard of and know what that is, but what does a budget look like for you and why is that so important for everybody?
I love a zero-based budget. So this is your income minus your expenses equals zero. So every dollar coming in is assigned to a category. And I always do it before the month begins. So start at the end of the month and say, okay, looking at the following month, here's what we're going to make and here's what we're going to spend. And in that budget, you're going to have give, save, and then obviously everything that else, all of your expenses. And it takes about 3 months to get it to work. So about 90 days. And that's my other piece of encouragement is stay with it because the first month is going to be terrible. You're going to think, oh yeah, we only need this much for groceries. And you're going to probably get halfway in the month and be like, we spend so much money on food. It's unbelievable, especially if you've never kept track. And so it's going to adjust. You're going to have to adjust it through that first month. The second month, it'll get a little bit better. And by the third month, it will start working. And for me, the budget is the one part of this whole plan that we talk about that's the hardest for me. I mean, I am a free spirit. I'm a spender. So the idea of a budget was kind of stressful for me. And when Winston and I got married almost 11 years ago, we didn't do a budget for the first probably 6-7 months of our marriage. And growing up as Dave Ramsey's kid, right? Like I knew we needed to do a budget, but I was like, we'll be fine. We're good. And a few months in, yeah, Winston was like, okay, we've got to figure out where's our money going, what's going on. I was like, okay, I know we need to do a budget. And for us, it was literally the exact same thing I teach. Like the first month was terrible. It was awful. We hit no number. I mean, it was just like, oh God, we spend so much here. We can't spend it here. And it was just terrible. The second month was better. And by that third month, it really did. It was like, okay, here's the consistent bills we have. We know what's coming in. And there is a level of control when you do a budget over your money that will get you to win long term. It will be very hard to win financially when you're not intentional. And that budget, it gives you the power to say, you know what? It doesn't limit my freedom. It actually gives me freedom because maybe for the first time in your life, you make a purchase and you don't question it. You're not thinking deep down, like, oh, is that too much? Is that okay? Guilt comes in after you get it in, or shame. And you're like, oh gosh. I mean, none of that exists with a budget. It is clear, it is there. And there are limits, there are boundaries. So there may be times you have to say no. But the amount of control you have over your money at that point it's unbelievable.
So with a budget, obviously, this is something we're doing for life indefinitely. It's not something to get you out of debt and then move on to old habits or whatnot. It's something you're sticking with long term.
Exactly. Yep. And as you walk down the baby steps and you progress, once you don't have debt and you're funding your retirement and you're kind of later on, you can have broader categories. You may not have to be as specific, but it is something that, yeah, you have to be intentional with the money. Because again, so many people look up at April 15th and you're like, I made how much last year? And where is it? Like I have no clue where it is. It just leaves. And so it really is. It's telling your money where to go.
So once debt's paid off, we want to save 3 to 6 months of our expenses, and then we're going to start saving for retirement. So how much do you recommend people put aside?
Yeah, for retirement, 15% of your income. And so if you have, yeah, a 401k with work or a 403b, Roth IRA, anything like that, up to 15% of your income.
Okay, so we're not saving for retirement while we're paying debt.
Exactly. Yeah, you pause everything, which freaks a lot of people out. They're like, no, but I get a match at work or, whatever it is. But so the key is those first three baby steps, that $1,000 paying off debt, and then that 3 to 6 months of expenses. Everything is solely focused on those. It is a singular focus because when you try to do 18 different things with your money, it's hard to see progress. But when you pause everything and you focus on just this, you're going to see progress really quickly. And for 18 months, 2 years, 3 years of your life, your 401k is going to be okay. It really will. If you gain that traction in that, it's going to be better. And then, yes. And then once that 3 to 6 months of expenses is saved, again, money market account, savings account, you have to look at that as insurance. It's not an investment. Don't invest it. It's there for a rainy day. And then, yep, press play on that 15% of your income for retirement.
I could see how that would be a great challenge for somebody getting into this later on in life. For somebody young, okay, I can worry about retirement savings later, but for somebody later on, and obviously, you guys have been doing this for years and it's a trusted method, but I could see how that could be challenging.
Yeah, for sure, especially if you're reaching retirement age. But you either have an option to just live with all these payments for the rest of your life, right? Or actually saying, you know what, I'm going to take care of the present first, get that handled, get that strong financial foundation under me. And then you have more money to throw at retirement. And mathematically, depending on age and income, you can't even catch up and get beyond what you would have versus if were just funding retirement on the side with not as much income.
So next, we're going to save for kids' schooling. We're going to pay off the house. And
Yeah, so 4, 5, and 6. That's right. Yeah, your retirement, kids' college, and paying off the house early all happen at the same time, but in that order. So that all happens, and then once the house is paid off, and your kids' college is funded, that 15% continues on. But then once you get to baby step 7, which is build wealth and be extremely generous, you can throw more money at retirement if you want, more in investments, let your money grow, and be extremely generous with it.
okay, but coming back to the giving, we're giving all the way through the whole process, like we talked about.
Yes, great reminder. Yep, through it all, as you're doing your budget, giving is always at the top, no matter where you are.
So Rachel, let's talk about work-life balance for you. I know you have 3 young children we've talked about, and you're doing all kinds of things in the world, and you have this career, you're an entrepreneur. How has things changed for you over the years since having kids, and how do you go about balancing all that?
It's changed a lot. I would say I had my first child 5 years into doing this job. And I remember I was leaving, maternity leave was ending, and I actually went back to work like 2 weeks early because I was like, I can't wait to get back. I can't wait to get back. And then we had a second child 2 years later, Caroline, and I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I had my third last October. And he kind of flipped my world upside down, to be honest. I don't know if it's 3 kids. I don't know if it's because it's my only boy. I don't know, but my heart really did shift. As a mom, I was like, man, I want to be home more. So honestly, my work-life balance changed in February of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, which is hilarious. I like kind of made this life decision that I'm going to pull back from work some. And then we were all home for, a few months because it was like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so that was a time for me that I was like, for me personally, it's not a mom guilt thing. It's just my desire to be home and be with my kids has grown hugely during this time. So I'm obviously doing a lot of work with launching this book, but my desire as a mom, it's grown a lot in the last year.
After this book's out in the world and all the PR is done, you're going to slow down quite a bit then?
Yeah, I think I will. Yeah, pull back. I'll do some because I love it. I love what I do. But yeah, I think I'll be home more.
A big part of the new book is finding our why behind money and what that looks like. Let's talk about how we go about finding that and why it is so important.
Yeah, your why is going to be your big motivator through the hard times. So that sacrifice we are talking about during paying off debt, you may wake up one day and be like, why the heck are we doing this? Like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. But having that why is so, so crucial. So the why can look like anything. And it can look like I'm doing all of this so that I never have to worry about money again. That is my why. I don't ever want to have to worry about it. Maybe it's I want to change my legacy for my family and I want my kids to have a different experience with money than I did. I mean, whatever it is, that big why has to be out there because that gets you through the hard times. It does. And I always kind of like to say, try to make your why something that you can't buy. Like if it's to buy a great car, sure, you're gonna be able to buy a great car at some point in your life and it's gonna be awesome. But once you buy the great car, what's next? Like if the why can be kind of that intangible, you can't purchase it, that's a motivator because it's something deep within you. It's a passion. It's something that really takes your heart as a whole to say, this is why I'm doing, this is why I'm making one of the biggest decisions in my life, which is how I handle my money. I'm flipping it upside down and I'm actually going to get control of it for the first time in my life because of this. Maybe it's peace of mind. Again, maybe it's changing your family tree. Whatever it is, having that why is so key.
And is this something you're actually writing down and looking at on a regular basis?
Yeah, you can absolutely. I mean, I think it's something that it's not that it doesn't have to be that necessary tangible goal, but it's that driving force behind the change. So for sure, yeah, if you want to write it down, have it everywhere. If you're married, having the same why I think is really crucial because it puts you both in a place of motivation together as a team.
Again, coming back to being a mom, work-life balance, what are some of the things you're doing for self-care to take care of yourself and, prevent yourself from going too hard and burning out?
Oh, it's important. Having like peaceful time for me is huge. So in the morning, it's a big deal for me to like have my coffee, have time by myself. Winston usually works out in the morning, so he'll come home and we have a great time in the morning just to connect. We'll just drink coffee together for 20, 30 minutes at most. And then obviously a little child comes down the stairs soon after that. But that morning time is really sacred for me. I've gotten into counseling. I love counseling. And it's part of one of the reasons I wrote the book is I like kind of self-discovered, wow, this is why I do so many things I do in life and who I am. And so that's been a big part of learning myself. And even within my marriage, Winston and I, we work on our marriage a lot because we prioritize it above almost anything. And so it's something that is huge for us. When we get to spend time together, we prioritize that time a lot.
You share a story in the book of trying to get into jogging as, preparing for a half marathon and really realizing that's not your thing and giving up on it, realizing that, which, cutting things and moving on can be a good thing when you realize it's not a good fit. But what are you doing now for exercise and keeping fit?
I knew you were going to ask me this. Holding children and lifting up diaper bags and lifting up kids. No, that is honestly the wheel of life, if you will. It's the one part that I'm like, gosh, I have terrible discipline in. I really do. I have terrible discipline in it. But it's something that I'm now realizing, okay, my diet, my health, what I eat and put in my body, I've really been researching and realizing, gosh, there's a lot. I know all this information has been out there in the world, but like actually applying it and learning it. But the whole working out, I go through spurts. I mean, there's times that I am so on and I'm so good and I feel great because you feel great when you are, right? When you're moving and all that. Right now, if I were to be extremely honest with you, yeah, I'm not in that season right now.
Maybe that'll be part of slowing down next year.
I mean, honestly, part of it is because I'm like, I want to be able to do that kind of thing because you feel better. I mean, there's so much, right? Of like, of your whole body. You just, the energy you have, all of it. And so taking care of that needs to be up. It's going to be bumping up the list soon.
Do you ever take time and meditate at all?
Not meditate necessarily. No, I mean, I spend tons of time in prayer. I journal a lot. I read, and so during my quiet time, that's kind of what I do. And then I've learned too that I'm not great at just sitting. And maybe this, when you mean by meditating too, just sitting silent and just being silent, is something that I'm working on.
I think there's really something to that, especially in today's world with, always being connected and you can just flip open your phone at any time and check social media and emails and stuff like that. There's really something to just being and being in the present moment, which, that is meditation in practice, being in the present moment. So there is really something to that.
Yeah, in those morning times too, I always put my phone on the other side of my nightstands because I'm like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want it to be a temptation because you get sucked into it right when you wake up, if you let it. And so disconnecting for that is really important.
And I think a big problem for a lot of people is connecting to social media these days. And you talk about this in the book, how we're all portraying, that everything is great and sharing our best moments and sharing the beautiful things we're purchasing and doing with family and creating a picture perfect vision of ourselves and our family. And then when we go on there and see that, it can be tempting to, feel like, oh, I deserve to be able to treat myself too and spend money or just see different things that you could appreciate and have in your life. So, how do people go about not getting caught up in that trap when it comes to social media?
Yeah, social media is tough because the hard thing too is you see one snapshot of someone's life and you just assume you know the whole picture. And it's not the case. So much stuff is happening behind that picture that you will never know. And so I think you have to realize what a smoke screen it is, a little bit of life, to when you see something, to automatically not judge it, but yet automatically not be like, oh, I have to have that to be happy. I have to be just like them. See it for what it is. And then for me, I mean, I spend time off of it. Like I'm off. I mean, I have work social media accounts, but I rarely get on. I never get on Facebook. I really never do. I never really get on Twitter. I mean, Instagram every now and then I'll flip on, but like I've even learned to my own self that I'm like, I spend so much time there. So I would say to people, if you find yourself in that rut where you're finding that these things are driving your purchases and why you want to do things you want to do is because of social media and because of other people, I would say see it for what it is, the reality that that is not their entire life. And then if you have to put a boundary, a time limit on it, do it. I mean, it's crazy. All the research that's come out on social media, it's basically all negative. Like we can use social media for good. Sure. Yes, we can. But majority of it is, the people within Google and Facebook and Instagram are not letting their kids have social media. I'm like, okay, what is this saying? Like, I mean, it's a big deal. And I know there's documentaries out. There was one on Netflix recently. I mean, it's a big part of our world that we have to be really careful of.
The Social Dilemma. Have you
That's
seen
it.
it yet?
That's it. I did.
Yeah, we did too.
So crazy, right? Oh, that's my thing. I'm like, all this stuff. I mean, there's a part of me that just wants a flip phone. I've really thought about it. I'm like, I kind of just want to go back to a flip phone. Like, if it's all that bad and it's this extreme in our lives, why would I not take this extreme stance on the other side? But I don't know if I will, but I've thought about it.
I think a lot of us have had that thought.
Yes.
And you kind of alluded to something when you're just chatting there about buying things for the wrong reasons, being that other people are going to see it on social media. And now this is a whole thing too, where you share in the book, there was a couple of stories there where this couple went on a honeymoon and basically I think it was the woman, she was trying to capture the perfect sunset and she would, order certain things on the menu to take a perfect picture for Instagram. And it's just taking away so much from being who we truly are and our experience in the moment. I mean, how many photos, maybe somebody took 10, 20, 30 photos of that sunset to get the perfect photo instead of just enjoying it with her new husband. And again, we could go on and on about social media and the negative aspect. There's definitely positive as well, but I just found there was a couple stories you share in the book that were just so profound and enlightening.
Yeah, yeah, and they're kind of extreme examples, but they're true. I mean, that was an article in the New York Times of this couple, and I'm like, oh man, we spend our lives looking through the screen to look at reality on the other side, and it's amazing what we miss. My husband, Winston, I think I write about in the book, but he hates social media. I mean, he has no accounts. He like will not enter into the realm. He's like, nope, it's not worth it. I don't want to get in it. And so we have this agreement of what I post on social media personally with our family, whether it's with kids or with him. And it's very rare. As if you look at any of my social media, they're rarely on it because we made this agreement that we're not going to just put, I'm not going to plaster my kids everywhere. If people do that, totally fine. It's just something we've decided as a family. So I've realized when I'm with the family, I mean, I'll take pictures, but I would be taking so many more if I knew other people were going to see it. And so I've caught myself being like, man, I am like living in the moment more and more and more because I'm just not worried about what other people are seeing. But I also have used that filter for my purchases because I'm a spender and I know myself, I know my personality. And so I make a filter too before I buy something. I say, okay, if no one sees this purchase, do I still want it? And if the answer is yes, then I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a nice pair of shoes. I just really want a nice pair of shoes. And I'm happy with that. But if I'm like, no, I really want someone to see these shoes, then I'm like, oh, and I don't buy it. I don't let myself buy it right then and there. I have to wait and I give myself some time. So that whole other people centered idea that you're motivated by other people, it's a big part of our lives.
Yeah, slippery slope for sure. And I did take notice looking through your Instagram account that there wasn't any family shots in there, pictures of your husband, and in reading your book, you do share quite a bit about the family. So I was curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll see some birthday pictures of the kids every now and then. But no, Winston, and he's so good looking. I'm like, babe, I want to show you off. You're so good looking. Yeah, no, but he's like, he has no desire to be seen by everyone in the world that he doesn't know.
Probably so much better for you guys.
I mean, honestly, we laugh about it, but I think it is true. If I married a guy that was like all about this life and was like, oh yeah, self promotion, I would be a miserable. I know I would turn into like the biggest brat in the world. So he's a great match for me. Brings me down to earth.
Coming back to the balance thing, if you're, on social media during your quote unquote free time, as an entrepreneur, like what real free time do you have? You're always on. So that's, gonna lead to burnout, pushing too hard. And so I think it's good to have boundaries there for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, Rachel, coming up on the end of our time together, how can the listeners, other than getting a copy of Know Yourself, Know Your Money, how can they connect with you after the show?
Yeah, I have a podcast and a YouTube show, The Rachel Cruze Show. So you can check it out there. And then, as I've just basked social media, I am on social media. We do have a work Facebook that you can go to, but a great community there, really, of people that are doing everything that I teach and that we talk about, of like walking through the baby steps. A great community there that really does encourage each other and helps each other in this time. And Instagram and Twitter. And then you can buy the book anywhere books are sold.
All right, I'm going to link it all up in the show notes. Thank you so much, Rachel. Any final thoughts before we part ways?
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I just want people to know no matter where you are financially, you can always have a different future. You can make a change today and say, you know what, I'm going to do something different. And that hope in the future that your future is going to be better than your present, it's there. We have evidence of it and it can happen, but you have to decide to make that change.
Beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.